We are exactly 100 days from the midterm elections in November, but at times it seems we are no closer to defending our election systems from outside meddling. A bipartisan piece of legislation that aims at slapping Russia with sanctions should they interfere in any upcoming elections is gaining widespread support on Capitol Hill. It's called the Deter Act. It was introduced by Senators Chris Van Hollen and Marco Rubio, and it would require the U.S. to impose major sanctions if the Director of National Intelligence declares that a foreign government meddled in any federal election. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland joins me now here in studio. Senator, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in on a Sunday night. Let's start by talking through this bill. We've talked about it before on this show, but in the wake of Helsinki, it seems to be gaining some new momentum.
Yes, after the performance of President Trump with President Putin, people became very concerned that the president's not going to protect the integrity of our elections. And we also know from Dan Coats, the DNI, that all the warnings are flashing red, that the Russians plan to interfere in our elections again. Midterms are less than 100 days away. This bill is very straightforward. It says that if after the election, the Director of National Intelligence finds that the Russians have interfered in our election, there will be automatic, very tough sanctions.
So that would require no action from the president or from Congress after that.
That's right. I mean, we're in the process of negotiations right now, but that is the whole idea, to deter interference.
Do you think Mitch McConnell would be willing to let this come to the floor?
Well, Mitch McConnell has indicated this is one of the measures that he's looking at. But you just raised the big question. This is kind of the test over the next 3 weeks about whether or not the Republican leadership in the Senate and the House is serious about protecting the 2018 elections and serious about protecting our democracy. We're going to have some hearings coming up, but if those hearings are not followed by real action, then they'll be saying that they just don't care about protecting us from the Russians.
What's your sense behind the scenes as you kind of go through these negotiations? I mean, is McConnell still interested in protecting the president, or is there real concern that, you know, the wave is going to be so strong that he's almost looking at a break?
Well, I think that after Helsinki, there was a change. And then the question is whether there's been enough of a change in psychology for them to actually take action. Because this bill is to protect us from 2018 interference, largely because the president has still refused to admit that the Russians interfered in 2016 and refused to take any real action about 2018. So we're going to have some hearings in the Senate, the Banking Committee, Foreign Relations Committee, and let's see where we go from there. But Senator Rubio and I have been gaining a lot of co-sponsors, Republicans and Democrats.
We're looking at a lot of them up there on the screen right now.
We need to move forward on this right away. I mean, time is running out.
Okay. So speaking of the midterms, from a political perspective, President Trump has seemingly threatened to shut down the government in September over immigration funding for his wall. On the one hand, if in fact Democrats do sweep in November, this may be his only chance to get the money for the border wall. But what impact do you think a shutdown would have?
Oh, the shutdown would be very bad news for the country, total disruption. And I think it'd be a very bad idea for Republicans going into. Do
you think it would hand, you run the DSCC that elects Senate Democrats. How do you think it would play in those races, those tough races?
Well, first of all, it's bad for the country. And because it's bad for the country, people around in all the states are going to say, what the hell is going on in Washington? Why is the president shutting down the government? And here he's telegraphed that it's his plan to do exactly that. Today, we just learned that the families who were separated at the border, that the Department of Homeland Security was calling them deleted families. They lost track of the kids who'd been separated from their parents. Yeah. And now the president is talking about essentially shutting down the government until he gets his way. I should emphasize, Democrats have strongly supported border security. What we don't want is to waste billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars building a wall that won't work.
It is possible, though, based on how kind of the plans are structured around the appropriations process, that you could only be looking at the shutdown of one or two departments, perhaps the Department of Homeland Security. Are the calculations on that different as you look at it politically?
Well, we don't know how all these appropriations bills are going to shape up. You're exactly right. I mean, there are 13 different bills. Whether some get passed now and some later, we'll see. But nobody wants to be shutting down these government agencies. If the president is going to shut it down, then he's going to have to take responsibility for that. I think it'd be a big mistake for the country, and I think it'd be a big mistake politically for Republicans. It would show the chaos of this presidency.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the back and forth in your own party. We've seen this a little bit more on the House side than the Senate side, but as you know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez defeating longtime top House leader Joe Crowley. She has campaigned on abolishing ICE, and several other of your colleagues who we all are sort of not so secretly running for president in 2020, or at least thinking about it, are talking about abolishing ICE. This is something that the White House has seized on, that other Republicans have argued is essentially a gift to them. What would you say to members of your party who are running on that right now? Is it helpful to you as you try to get incumbent Democrats in red states reelected?
Well, look, Democrats have been very clear we're for border security. The issue with ICE is the way...
I think many Americans probably look at abolish ICE and say, actually, that's not very clear.
Well, I think the issue you've got with respect to the Department of Homeland Security is how they're managed by this administration. And we don't need to be separating moms and dads from their kids in order to have strong border security. In my own view, ICE is the problem with ICE is the way the president and his team have managed ICE. And so I don't think we should be getting into a big fight with respect to the president on ICE per se, but the president's the one who's picking the fight right now with respect to shutting down the government if he doesn't get money for his wall. I haven't seen him tweet out for a very long time that Mexico's going to be paying for this wall. I mean, you remember that was what he said?
That does seem to have been left out, yes. That's a fair point. As we wrap up here, health care. That's an issue that, poll after poll shows is at the top of mind for American voters. It's the one-year anniversary of the attempts to repeal the Affordable Care Act and that not getting through the Senate. Do you think that your voters are hearing your message right now on health care through all of the noise that is the Trump presidency?
Well, I think voters have this on top of their minds right now. So when our senators go back to their states, they're not hearing a lot of what's happening in Washington, all the insider stuff. They're hearing about rising costs of prescription drugs. They're hearing about rising gas prices. And Democrats have been clear. We have a plan to reduce the costs of prescription drugs. Just tweeting out against pharmaceutical companies is not a long-term solution. We have a long-term solution. We want to invest in modernizing our infrastructure. Those are the kinds of things that people around the country are focused on. The president tries to distract people a lot. Sometimes he's successful in terms of messaging, but what he cannot change is what people are thinking about, and that's what our candidates are talking about on the campaign trail.
Senator Chris Van Hollen, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you also for, I know you participated in a fundraiser for our colleagues at the Annapolis Capital Gazette. Who,
yes, we lost five
so
incredible people in that terrible shooting.
Of course, in your home state, so thank you very much for that.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.